In this week's Seder, we have the last mitzvah, the very last mitzvah that the Torah commands us. And that is the mitzvah of the Ata Kisvu Lechem Es Ashira Hazais, the mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah. And the Pais can point out that if someone can't write a Sefer Torah himself, he should hire someone to write a Sefer Torah for him. But in addition to the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah, so that the Sefer Torah should be available in every Jewish household, the Sefer HaChinuch explains, and this is not only his opinion, it's the opinion of the Rosh and Menachos and many other Rishonim as well, and it's brought down in Halacha, but I'll quote from the Sefer HaChinuch. V'dabeni, know my son, says the Chinuch, she'afoti, even though she'ikr hachiyav di'araisa ein rak the Sefer HaTorah, even though the ikr chiyav is only for a Sefer Torah, ein safek, there is no question, shegam b'shar ha-svarim shenefchabru al pi ha-Torah, in regard to all svarim that explain the Torah, that were authored al pi ha-Torah, yesh l'chol echad liknois mehem kefi ha-yecholos. Everyone should buy as many of them as possible. Minatayim she'amanim, for the reasons that I explained, that the Torah should be available in every household, it should be accessible. If you have to go somewhere else to learn the Torah, that creates a whole different atmosphere. The avoti she'anichu lo yavaisav mehem rabim, even though your father may have left you many svarim, there is a mitzvah on people to purchase svarim on their own. But the Chavetz Chaim points out an interesting thing. The Chavetz Chaim says, indeed, this mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah, buying a Sefer Torah, or as many Rishonim understand it, the mitzvah of buying svarim, the mitzvah of making Torah available in your house, this mitzvah follows the statement in the Torah, of which was the pasuk before, Yenochi hastir astir panei v'yemahu, and I will hide my face in that day, al kol hara asher asa, for all the evil which they shall have wrought, ki panei el Elohim acherim, and that is as a punishment, for they have turned to other gods. What is the connection over here? Frek the Chavetz Chaim. Hastaras panim, that Hashem is hidden, we don't understand why things are happening to us, followed by the mitzvah of the Ata Kisvu Lechem Es Ashira Hazais, of writing the Sefer Torah. And for the Chavetz Chaim, the connection is obvious. The Torah is teaching us that the Torah, Limud HaTorah, and Mesiras Nefesh for Torah, and in particular the idea of making Torah available in our homes, that is the light that is going to protect us during a period of Hastar v'Chas v'Shalom. The Torah has the Koyach, says the Chavetz Chaim, I quote, L'hagein, to protect, the L'hatzal, and to save Mikol Tzara v'Yogai, from every tzara and worry. And precisely during a time of Hastaras Panim. But let's remember, Hastaras Panim means that Hashem hides his face. Like a father sometimes, who wants to test his child, and he hides behind the pole to teach the child a lesson that he shouldn't go off on his own. And the child is frightened for a moment. He says, "Oh, where's my father? It's Hastaras Panim, where is he?" And then the father steps out from behind the pole, and there's a sigh of relief. But the truth is, all along, even when the father was behind the pole, he was still looking at his son. It's just that the son couldn't see the father. I heard from a Yid once a beautiful word. The pasuk says in Shir HaShirim, Ashgiach min ha'chalonos, neitzitz min ha'charakim. Sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom is a Mashgiach min ha'chalonos. The Rebbeinu Shalom supervises from the window. When someone is supervising from the window, he can see you, and usually you can look up at the window and you see him. But then there's a different kind of a supervisor, who is neitzitz min ha'charakim. He looks through from the cracks. If someone is looking at you through a crack in the wall, by all probability he sees you and you don't see him. The Rebbeinu Shalom is always looking at us. Yiddish neshamas are never hefker. And whatever happens, happens with a cheshbon. Sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom looks at us, b'pchinas mashgiach min ha'chalonos. He sees us and we feel his presence. And we understand why things are happening. Sometimes it's neitzis min ha'charakim. The Rebbeinu Shalom sees us, like in the marshal, the father hiding behind the pole. But we can be frightened, for we don't see him. But that is a lesson that is important to us, and that we must endure. Now, if someone is staring at you behind a crack, and he shines a light, then you'll feel the warmth of his supervision, or at least you'll be able to recognize it. You'll know that you're being watched over, even though the person is behind the crack. In a way that sort of explains the L'shayin Katshe of the Chavetz Chaim, when he says the reason the Torah presents the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah right after the pasuk that warns of Hastaras Panim, Chavetz Chaim says the light of the Torah will shine through. When? Even during a time of a star spawning. Limud HaTorah and Mesiras Nefesh or Limud HaTorah brings betachin and amunah in a yid's heart, even during a time that the Rebbeinu Shalom is not mashgiach min hachalonos, but rather meitzitz min hacharakim. The emes is that this is a parsha that we almost always read during the Aseres Yemei Tshuva. And the Aseres Yemei Tshuva are always a very trying time for Klal Yisrael as a whole, for the world at large, and for every individual. You know, there's a machlokes, the Rambam and the Ramban, whether tefillah, whether davening, is deraisa or drabanan. The sheet of the Ramban is that tefillah is midrabanan. Davening is midrabanan. However, the Ramban himself says that during an eis tzara, when a person is in trouble, then it becomes a deraisa, even according to the sheet of the Ramban. What is called an eis tzara? Many of them have and ask on the Ramban. I'll call neshima v'neshima to halal kal. Yid is always in an eis tzara in the sense of we have to always come on to the Rebbeinu Shalom for life. There are those that explain that the Ramban's eis tzara refers to the Aseres Yemei Tshuva. The fate of our lives are being decided now. It has already been written, hopefully, written l'toiv. If not, it is yet to be sealed, and we can still change it through our tshuva. And this warrants all of our koiches for tefillah, for tshuva, and for tzedakah. During the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, especially before Yom Kippur, the halacha is we are supposed to go to our friends and ask them mechila. In case we did anything wrong, please be meichel us. Why Erev Yom Kippur? And why not Erev Rosh Hashanah? Fragt doch some cipher. Apparently it should be before Rosh Hashanah that we go to our friends and we ask them, please be meichel me for what I did. On Rosh Hashanah our fate is written. It is during the Aseres Yemei Tshuva that we have a chance to possibly change it. But shouldn't we make sure to ask mechila before it's even written? Dr. Sam Seifer, you have people that can be friends, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. Friends that get together and don't have the right hashkafos, friends that get together and have the wrong ideas of what a good time means, can be the worst thing. Ein shalom with a shoyim. That's not the shalom that the Torah is talking about. So indeed, while we are all obligated to ask mechila from anyone that we are hurt, but the ultimate objective is to reach a certain shleimus with our neighbors, with our kroivim, with our friends. You first need, says the Chassam Sofer Rosh Hashanah, to establish, to determine in our hearts who we want to be and what type of a life we want to pursue, and then we can follow through by knowing who we want to be friends with. And although the chiyuv to ask mechila would include anyone we hurt, whether or not we want to be friends with them, but the idea is first establish where you want to be, in which direction do you want to go, and then look to make amends with your friends. Because then it's important who you're going to be with. Then you'll know who you want to be with. But perhaps, from what the Chavetz Chaim writes in the Sefer Shmir Salosh in the Shara Tzvuna, Perik Dalet and Hey, we can explain from a different perspective why it has to be this way. First comes Rosh Hashanah, and then comes the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, the extra tefillah, and the special instructions to ask mechila from our friends before Yom Kippur. The Chavetz Chaim stresses the importance of being Zanediwan L'Kanschos, of looking at your friends in a favorable way. The Gemara says in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah that Tezayin Amidbeis, Gimel Svarim Niftachen L'Yom Hadin. 3 Svarim are opened in preparation for the Day of Judgment. Although the Chavetz Chaim, quoting Rashi, says there that it refers to the Yesod Chiyah, the judgment of Chiyas HaMeisim, but Rosh Hashanah is a preparation for that. Tzadikim Gemurim, those who are complete Tzadikim, are written and sealed right away, L'chai Olam. Rishoyim Gemurim, and by definition, Rishoyim Gemurim means, as Rashi explains it over there, people that have more Averos than Mitzvahs. They are written and sealed, Rachmano Litzlan, for Gehenna. And Beinanim, those who are in the middle, they are written but not sealed. They still have a chance to turn things over during the Aseres Yemei Tshuva. So it is of utmost importance how a person is categorized. Now on the surface it would be simple enough. All of my actions in life are added up. If most are mitzvahs, I'm a tzaddik. If most are averos, I am a rasha. But the Chavetz Chaim says it's far from simple. Because every mitzvah and every avera can be broken down and scrutinized. If chas v'shalom, the Rebbeinu Shalom approaches someone's life with midas hadin, then all of his mitzvahs can be destroyed. Then it could be argued that's a mitzvah. You didn't finish that mitzvah. You didn't do it with enough love, with fear. That's the way you did that mitzvah. And for what? Only for honor. Those mitzvahs don't count. And Rahman al-Islam, when it comes to the Averos, we can look and find many. So one person can do X amount of mitzvahs and X amount of Averos, and it depends how we view it. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu views it with midas hadin, then the mitzvahs fall apart. They don't count. It wasn't done with enough simcha. It wasn't done with enough shleimus. He missed so many details of the mitzvah, and the Averos are amplified, not exaggerated, but carefully positioned, and the net result is more Averos than mitzvahs. This person becomes a rasha. On the other hand, the exact opposite can be true. A person can be judged with midas chesed and midas rachamim, and in terms of his Averos, he didn't really mean it. Oh, that Avera, never, he was influenced by that friend. It bothered him so much, like the Rebbe of Zisha said, I have seen many malachim created by the Averis of Yidden, but I never saw a whole malach, the Rebbe of Zisha said. Always missing a hand, a foot, a wing. What does this mean? Even when a Yid does an Avera, he has a guilty conscience, he doesn't really want to do the Avera, he feels bad afterwards, he feels bad beforehand. So if you look at the Averas that way, you begin to diminish the effect of the Averas. And then you turn to his mitzvahs. He didn't finish the mitzvah, but he wanted to finish the mitzvah. He didn't do it with enough love, but in his heart, he wanted to do it with love. Truly didn't do the mitzvah with a smile because so many things were bothering him. Had things been okay for him, surely he would have done the mitzvah with a huge smile on his face, with tremendous joy. So you can take midas hachesed and midas harachamim and create a net result of many more mitzvahs than Averos. So the issue is far more complicated than did the person do more mitzvahs than Averos, or did he do more Averos than mitzvahs? The real issue becomes, how is he judged? With midas hadin or with midas hachesed? What determines whether a person is judged with midas hadin or midas hachesed, which ultimately may determine whether he falls into the category of a rasha or a tzaddik? Zok the Chavetz Chaim, and I quote him again in the Shmiras Haloshen Shar HaTevuna, Perik Dalet. Then a kol zeh toli, it all depends on lefihu anhaga shehinigas asmei b'mei chayim. How did he act im habriyas together with other people? In darkei hayolodin oisam lekavchos. Oh, the neighbor Nebuch, it's so upsetting. She doesn't talk to me because she has so many tzaros. If only I can make life better for her. Oh, so-and-so parked in my driveway. Must be in a rush. Okay, so I'll park outside. My husband didn't do this or my wife did that. I'll wait it out. He or she had a hard day. If that is your attitude, if that is the way you judge the people around you, so the Rebbeinu Shalom takes all of your mitzvahs and all of your aveiros and puts them into the same perspective. The Rebbeinu Shalom will amplify your good deeds, complete the uncompleted, and diminish the effect of the aveiros. On the other hand, if your attitude was the opposite, if you were always looking to be angry, looking for faults in members of your family, friends, neighbors, partners, whatever the case may be, and as a result you were the first to criticize and to demand justice, so the Rebbeinu Shalom says, fine, if that's the way your understanding of judgment is, we will judge you that way. And make no mistake, says the Chavetz Chaim, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges us that way, we won't have any mitzvah, or at least very few, that are going to survive the scrutiny, that are going to stand up to this type of pressure. If you're constantly speaking evil about people, then the Malachi Yasharis will do the same about you. Chavetz Chaim quotes a medrash to that effect. Al-Kain therefore concludes the Chavetz Chaim, Tzarech sheyeda ha'adam b'nafshay. A person has to realize, b'yoydei b'chayim, while you're still alive and you can, ki be'eis shehudan es chaverei. When you judge a friend, then what you say about him is an organization of the type of justice you yourself are going to have to endure. So now, getting back to our question, why is the halacha that we ask mechila dafka before Yom Kippur as opposed to before Rosh Hashanah? Who we ask mechila from, and what we ask mechila for, and whether or not we're meichel our friends, all depends on the attitude. If we take the position of what a terrible victim we are, and how everyone else has it better, and I'm being taken advantage of from everyone, So it's hardly likely we'll be looking to ask mechila from anyone, and it's even less likely we'll be willing to meichel someone when they ask us mechila. But if we take the position that we will look to diminish the aveiros of people, or the negatives in the respective characters that we have to deal with during the course of a day and a lifetime, if we don't think all that much about ourselves, but we think more about what we can do for others, if we think more about tolerating the ill effects of others, and everyone has negative flaws to their character, and we look to judge everyone l'kav chus, and to try to only find the best in people, to amplify the good, and to dismiss the ra, then the chances are we will have many more people to ask mechila from, and we will be much happier to grant mechila when it's requested from us. So there's a sequence over here. The purpose of Rosh Hashanah is putting things into perspective. Rosh Hashanah, we have to get the message. We are now going to be judged. And the direction of where we are headed is going to be determined by the category we are in. Are you a tzaddik or a rasha? And whether we are a tzaddik or a rasha depends on whether we have more mitzvahs or more aveiros. And whether we have more mitzvahs or more aveiros depends on how do we view others. So the purpose of Rosh Hashanah is for us to work on ourselves, how we view others. And when we master to be down the world l'kav chus, and to be tolerant and loving and caring and understanding of others, and we've made it through Rosh Hashanah. Now the Rebbeinu Shem has put us into the category of tzaddikim, because the Rebbeinu Shem is now going to be down us the same way through the midas hachesed, giving us more mitzvahs than aveiros. And now we are ready for Yom Kippur. Now we are ready to ask mechila and to grant mechila, because our attitude is in position to ask mechila and to grant mechila. There is a vart from Yisachar David Delv. He points out people go to tzaddikim and they ask them for brachos and yeshuas. The truth is, any yid, if he really means it, can be poil a yeshua for a friend. What is the inyan then of the dafka going to a tzaddik? Because the understanding is that the tzaddik is on a much higher level of ahavas Yisrael than the average person. And the mele, when the tzaddik is mispal for someone, he cares more for someone. But there's no trick over here, said the Velzerov. If the average yid is on the same madreg of ahavas Yisrael, he can also be poil yeshuas and achames and nisim and iflais. And in conjunction with what we just learned from the Chavetz Chaim, it all falls into place. The more our attitude is to think about others and to care for others, and the more HaKadosh Baruch Hu grants us chesed and rachamim, and there is a rule, loi adu rosh. That means that the first day of Rosh Hashanah cannot fall on Sunday, Wednesday, or Erev Shabbos. Not Aleph, not Sunday, not Dalet, and not Vav. So the first day of Rosh Hashanah can only be either Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Shabbos. Therefore, it is Mevuyer in Shulchan Aruch, Siman Taf Chaf Ches, that when Rosh Hashanah falls on either Monday or Tuesday, we separate Nitzavim and vayeilech into two separate kriyas, two separate weeks. Parshas Nitzavim is read the Shabbos prior to Rosh Hashanah, and Parshas vayeilech becomes Shabbos Tshuva. Of course, there's one more parsha, Parshas Hazinu, but that would then be between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. However, if the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Thursday or Shabbos, so what happens automatically is you will only then have one free Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot. One Shabbos will either be Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. Therefore, what happens automatically is that if Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, falls on Thursday or Shabbos, the Nitzavim and vayeilech are combined to one parsha. And Parshas Hazinu becomes Shabbos Tshuva. It becomes the open Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Now, if you look at these halachos in Shulchan Aruch about which parsha is to combine, which parsha is to separate, they usually come with simanim. And the siman for this is in Daniel. There is a pasuk, Pazbag Hamelach, which means the food of the king. That's something that's repeated several times in Daniel. So Chazal darshan like this: Pas Bag Hamelach. Bag Hamelach is Rosh Hashanah, the king of the year, the day that we are Mamluch HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the world, the day that we all stand in front of the king. If that comes out on days or Gimel, on Monday or Tuesday, if that's the day we say a Melech HaKadosh, so the rule is pas. What does the word pas mean? Break it up. Like by a carb mincha, it says pasois oisa pitum. You break it up into pieces. So when Rosh Hashanah falls, when the first day of Rosh Hashanah falls on either Monday or Tuesday, the rule is you break up Nitzavim from vayeilech. Al pi pashtus, of course, it's just a play of words. Pasgav hamelach. But we know nothing is a coincidence. So what significance can we find in the remnants of Pasgav hamelach that indeed teaches us about Nitzavim and vayeilech? I heard from my Neshgiach Zangezont that generally speaking, all the Parshiyos Mechabaris, all the Parshiyos in the Torah that are connected, when we read 2 Parshiyos during 1 week, most of them come out during a time of the year where the union of Chibur between Klal Yisrael is of primary importance. Let's take a tour through the Torah and let's see which Parshiyos come together. The Yaakov Pekudei comes together. That's the union of the Mishkan, which is Mechaber Klal Yisrael. Every single year donated something to the Mishkan. That's what made the Mizbeach and the Avodah of the Kohanim so powerful, that it was a Chibur, it was a Avodah V'Tzibur of all of Klal Yisrael. The Yaakov Pekudei is also generally before or right after Parashas HaChodesh, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, where all of the Yidden had to bring their shkalim, again being Mechaber, all of Klal Yisrael for the Avodah of the New Year. What other Parshiyos could come together? You have Tazria B'Tzayra, Achri Kedeshim, and Bahar B'Chakaisei, which all come out during the Yemei HaSir, where of course we know that Talmidei Rabbi Akiva died because they were not Noheg Kavod Zeh B'Zeh, and the whole point of the Yemei HaSir is to be Mesakin that, to be Ma'ir the Ahava and the Chibur between Klal Yisrael, that is the Hachana for Kabbalah Satayra, V'Yichen Sham Yisrael, Neged Ahar, Ki Ish Echad B'Leiv Echad, that was a prerequisite for Kabbalah Satayra. Then you have the possibility of Chukas Balak coming together, Matis Masai. These are during the weeks of the Bein HaMatzar, and we lost the Beis HaMikdash because of Sinas Chinam. So what does that have to do with 2 Parshiyos being together? The Zohar Kodesh says that the entire week is crowned by the Parsha of the week. There were tzaddikim who looked for the answers of all of their complex current situations in the Parsha of the week. There's the Kayach HaPayel Benifal. The way we read the Parsha changes our lives. Shulchan Aruch says if you're Maver Sedra, it's Marichan LaYama V'Shnaisav. It gives a person long life. What does that mean, Yama V'Shnaisav? Not just long years, but significant days, the Mashal explains. It changes the whole Mechus HaChayim. If a person lives with the Parsha, it has a direct effect on us. When 2 Parshiyos are combined, Klal Yisrael is combined. And during the weeks that we have to combine ourselves, the mere fact that the formula presents 2 Parshiyos together, that generates the Kayach HaChibur if we are looking for it. Nitzavim Vayeilech, on the other hand, is a little bit interchangeable. On the one hand, it also represents the Kayach HaChibur, because this is the time of the year that we have to ask Mechila from anyone that we hurt. Yom Kippur is not Mechaper on Averis that are Bein Adam B'Chaverei. But on the other hand, it's also a time of reevaluation. Which are the elements in our environment that affect our Yiddishkeit in a negative way? Which are the kind of relationships that we may pursue for totally innocent reasons, business, commerce, entertainment, but as a result, we know that it is drawing us further away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And a person has to stop and think and say, okay, in a mild, proper manner, maybe there are certain types of friendships that are not good for me. And of course, if you have the kayach to be masaking someone else, that's a different prina. But if you feel that you are slipping, then it is time to gently create partitions. And that is really the powerful message over here in Nitzavim Vayeilech. Because if you think about this for a moment, apparently there's an interesting distinction between Nitzavim Vayeilech and the other Parshiyos Mechabaris. The other ones are maneuverable. It often happens that Eretz Yisrael is a parsha ahead of us. Because if the second day of Yom Tov is Shabbos, so we don't read the next parsha because we read the Kriya of Yom Tov. But in Eretz Yisrael, the second day is regular Shabbos, so they go on. So how does that even out? By the next possibility of 2 parshiyos coming together, so we in Chutz La'az will read the 2 parshiyos together to catch up 1 parsha. For example, if the second day of Shavuos is Shabbos, so we're going to lag behind Eretz Yisrael. So when it comes to Chukas Balak, usually it evens out. They are going to read Chukas Balak as independent parashiyos. But when they get to Balak, we're going to read Chukas Balak together. That's how we catch up. But in Tzav vayeilech, this doesn't happen. There's no room afterwards for evening things out because it's the end of the year. Parshas Hazinu has to be the last Shabbos of the year. The Zayis HaBrach is Simchas Torah. There's no way around this. There's no room afterwards for adjustments. Everything comes to a head over here. The Tzav vayeilech has to be either together or separate, depending on the current situation. And the emes is that's a very powerful lesson in terms of understanding the Yemei Adin and the Yemei HaTshuva. We have to approach the Yemei HaTshuva from two completely different angles. On the one hand, to be la'oira hava achva v'shalom v'reis, between family members, between Yidden, between members of our shul, between members of different shuls, between those that went off and made their own shuls, between those that dress like us and those that dress differently, between those that speak one language and those that speak the other. But by the same token, in terms of our evaluation, which we have to do before the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we have to look and say, well, I may have certain business relationships, I may be going to certain places for entertainment purposes, and I think it's nice, I'm getting together with friends, and those friends are not bringing me to the right places. They're not setting me up in a situation where my neshama is going. On the contrary, the peel, the veil over my neshama is getting thicker and thicker because I seem to be dragged into different things. And if you have the power to positively influence them, by all means, but if not, then it's time to step out, even if it's socially not the right thing to do. It doesn't give me a right to hate anybody. In my heart, I have to be mispal and beg and try, and by all means, if I have the koyach to do so, to have a positive influence on others. But on the other hand, I have to see that where I am slipping, I have to get out of the wet floor. Now, what happens when someone is invited to dine with the king? Who is worthy to be together with the king? One who can feel the current situation. When there is a simcha going on in the king's life, he generates simcha by the king's table. He opens the doors, he draws people closer. During a time of crisis, during a time of decision, during a time where the king needs ultimate concentration, or during a time of personal tragedy, and the king has to reflect upon himself. So the one who dines at the king's table has to know how to close the door. He has to know how to reflect the proper mode. He has to know how to act accordingly. And that perhaps is the remnant, that the formula to know when it's Tzav vayeilech go together or when they are separated are the psukim from Daniel, Pas Bag HaMelech. Yes, if Rosh Hashanah is Beis or Yemos, the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Monday or Tuesday, Pas, you break it up. And if Rosh Hashanah falls the other days, it has to be together. A Yid has to have the power to know when to attach himself to and what he has to in a mild way, and not thinking that you're better than anyone else, but realistically evaluate your situation and say, I have to separate myself from listening to certain people, from reading certain people, from things that I know simply are having a negative effect on my whole mahus. And only then am I worthy to dine with the king, to accept the malchus that the Yisrael Yimei Tshuva represents. So this year we have vayeilech on its own. Vayeilech Moshe Rabbeinu went. Where did he go? So the pasuk says vayeilech Moshe, and he spoke to all of Klal Yisrael. But you can say this by every passion in the Torah, that he went and he spoke to all of Klal Yisrael. What is the dogish over here? What is the emphasis on he went? What does this teach us? Let me share with you quickly 7 beautiful pshatim on vayeilech Moshe. Pshat number 1. The Eben Ezra says this. Moshe Rabbeinu went to every single shevet independently to say goodbye to them and to encourage them that they ought not to be frightened. Ki Hashem hoilech lefneihem, for Hashem goes before them. And there's a tremendous lesson over here. He didn't make one general speech to all of Klal Yisrael in this regard. When it came to saying that goodbye and to give them the final encouragement, he knew that every shevet needs a different kind of a shmooze, a different kind of encouragement. Moshe Rabbeinu knew the respective fears and concerns of every Yid. And in a sense, he went to each shevet independently, and he also went, O Kol Yisrael, the pasuk says, to every single Yid, and to say, I know exactly what you are worried about. Don't be frightened. Whether I'm here or not, the Rebbeinu Shalom is with you. And the truth is, Moshe Rabbeinu is with us. The Yisrael of Vaida explains, the Yom Bechaya also, others, Vayeilech Moshe means what the Zohar Kodesh says, that is Pashtusa de Moshe b'chol dar v'dar. There is a spark of Moshe in every single generation, in all the leaders of every single generation. Moshe Rabbeinu's tefillos were meant for us until Mashiach comes. So Vayeilech Moshe, Moshe continues to go. That's the second shot. The Medrash Tanchuma says Vayeilech Moshe is a lashon of Musar. L'chu chazu mefalis Hashem. Leave what you're doing. That's how David of Kosk explains it. You have to stop a second and step out of the whirlpool of life, the pressures of life that distract you from the real thing, from the life that's going to go on forever. Stop and think. So you see, Moshe Rabbeinu went out and he gave them the ultimate chizuk and encouragement, and by the same token, the musar. Smol doicha, the yamin, the kareves, the balance, the understanding of how to be makarev and how to set the record straight. The Talmud explains this further. The Talmud explains why the double lashon. So we know what Chazal dashen. You have to keep on giving musar, but there's another remez over here. You have to give musar to yourself before you can give musar to others. And that's really the danger in the mission of separating. Maybe you feel an environment is not good for you, and therefore you have to step out. But don't do so thinking because I am so much better than them. That's counterproductive for many reasons. You have to consider yourself just as vulnerable as they are, except that for me it's not good, and I'm the spouse, and I hope that they straighten out also. When Moshe Rabbeinu gave Musar, he included himself. Vayeilech Moshe. And he spoke to all of Klal Yisrael. So to tell us, he went along and said, look, I have to fix this. Come and fix it with me. That is the way to be misakin people. That's the way to talk to people. Don't set yourself on a pedestal and say, I am so much better than you, and you better shape up to come up to my level, because that may be nothing more than just plain gaiva. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ein ani v'hu yecholim l'adikecha. That doesn't bring a person closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That separates him. But fakert. When a person gives techacha, he should feel that he is going and he is speaking to all of Klal Yisrael. Vayeilech Moshe v'yedaber es advarim ha'ela el kol Yisrael. He went along with them. And whenever Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to someone, it was always from the perspective of, we're on the same level. Let's work this out together. Even though in reality Moshe Rabbeinu was nowhere near the same level. Of course he was light years ahead of them. But the way to give musar is to drop down. Vayeilech Moshe. That's how you speak to kol Yisrael, to every single yid. Someone told me he heard a child say he can't wait till he's big because then he can talk by davening. His father always smacks him or yells at him when he talks by davening, but he looks up at his father and he sees that his father has to catch up on the day's stocks or news, sometimes even during Chazaras HaShatz. So if the person you're giving musar to sees hypocrisy, that musar is going to have exactly the opposite effect. On the other hand, if the father says to the child, look, you know, we both have to work on this together, that's something else. You can acknowledge the fact that it has to be corrected and still encourage others to do it, even though you yourself have a struggle. Adarabah, let's struggle together. The Noam the Garden explains. Vayeilech Moshe emphasizes that Moshe Rabbeinu's musar to Klal Yisrael had nothing to do with personal prestige or honor. He totally left any personal kavanah. And that is why Moshe Rabbeinu kept on growing throughout his life. Because he never did things for himself. Vayeilech Moshe says the Noam Agadim. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu continue to grow from every experience in his life? His madregas went up and up, continued to soar upwards. Because Vayedaber es advarim ha'ela el kol Yisrael. Whenever he said anything, he had one intention in mind. That was to benefit any single yid possible in all of Klal Yisrael together. The Talmud also explains Vayeilech Moshe represents the tremendous zrizos, the quickness and the swiftness that Moshe Rabbeinu did these mitzvahs, even though it was the last day of his life. Others explain, Klal Yisrael was in no rush to come and hear the shir. You see, they knew Moshe Rabbeinu had to give over the 613 mitzvahs before he would go up to Olam Haba. They had already gotten 611. Two more were missing. The two mitzvahs in this week's parsha, the mitzvah of Hakel and the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah. So the feeling, the general sentiment in Klal Yisrael was, let's not go hear the shir, because as long as Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't give us the shir, he can't leave us. Moshe Rabbeinu saw what was happening, and instead of taking advantage of this, vayeilech Moshe, with the same zrizos he always did, he ran to teach them Torah, saying, this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to do, and I will do it with the same level of simcha and quickness that I have done everything else. And finally, the Sefer Eitz Chaim brings vayeilech Moshe, that when it came time for Moshe Rabbeinu to leave this world, it was like stepping from one room into another, which in essence is true for everyone, except usually there's a difficult process over the threshold. For Moshe Rabbeinu it wasn't. It was as simple as going from here to there. And this last part is not an independent shot, rather it is a combination of all the ideas and the morals that we discussed until now. Because Moshe gave his life for Klal Yisrael, because he was not scared to give Musar, because he loved and cared and was Moshe Nefesh himself for everyone for the sake of everyone, because he understood every individual and was mechazik him for what that person needed. It's because of all the other pshatim of vayeilech Moshe that he was zecher to the last one, to simply go from one cheder to another.
This shiur is distributed by Kol Hadas, 11 Stei Chemet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-0267. Post Box 57035.